Welcome to JS Bladecraft. This is the Ape-X, designed by Julio Diez, produced by none other than Work Tuff Gear. So absolutely, guys, yes, welcome back to JS Bladecraft. So I am very excited to bring you this knife, this Ape-X. It's been a long time in the making. Let's talk about the designer first. So the designer is Julio Diez. Now, Julio Diez, I met briefly at the show. There was a lot going on at the last Blade Show East, but I did meet him at the Work Tuff Gear table. Really dynamite guy. The first thing that I reviewed, made from Condor, and I picked this up, I was able to pick this up at the show, is this was designed by Julio Diez. This is the black leaf knife made from Condor. You can see the review. I'll leave a link to the review of this knife. This is an exceptional knife. Thin profile, good slicer, but really a strong, well-made knife. Really a nice handmade feel, very comfortable in the hand. Fantastic blade, great edge retention. Just the look, the aesthetic, the performance of this blade is fantastic. So I was really, really happy with what Julio was bringing to the table in terms of his designs. And obviously Condor, you know Condor, they make some good stuff. So from doing this review, we started talking over messaging, and he had wanted to send me an Ape-X, okay, that he designed from Work Tuff Gear. And I have never gotten my hand on this knife before, so I was very excited to get it. And thank you, Julio, for sending this over to me, for bringing it to you guys so I can review it for you and show you my thoughts on it, showing it to you work and all that stuff. Julio is a designer for Work Tuff Gear. He's a designer for Condor, and actually I think he's going to be starting to send in some designs to Tops, which is cool. But you could also find him on his personal site, which is Diez Knives, because he's a designer and he also makes his own knives. He makes Kydex sheets, letter sheets, burlap, micarta, all that stuff. So he does everything on his own. He does a really good job at it. So I'm gonna leave you a link to his Instagram page and also his website, which I believe is diazknives.com. Definitely check out his stuff. He's got some really, really good stuff in terms of the designs and his own make of knives. So definitely Diez Knives does great work in his designs, also with Condor, and finally with this Work Tuff Gear that I'm seeing here. First off, guys, on these tough times that we're dealing with right now, especially now more than ever, you want to appreciate our military and our armed forces. Now, you can think about whatever you want to think about with the government and all that, but definitely our armed forces are people that basically put boots to the ground and planes in the air that defend us. You want much appreciation and respect to our armed forces and our military, and especially our veterans that have served us and have given so much for us. Be awareness for hashtag 22 a day no more for veteran suicide. So let's, this is just basically just to spread awareness for that fact, and to let veterans know simply that you have a place here always with us in our knife and sword community. Much love to our veterans and much respect to our armed forces. So if we start with the Kydex, basically just to sum this up, this is everything that you would want a Work Tuff Gear knife to be. Well made, great Kydex, great sheath. Everything is just solid and well made and well thought out. It's exactly the way what you would expect from getting something from Work Tuff Gear. In terms of this Kydex, it's a front, it's a top releasing Kydex, so you can take it out. So you don't actually have to pull it all the way out. You can kind of pull it off from the top, which you can see the space here, which is very convenient. Now, don't you dare call this a machete. I know a couple people have said that call this a machete. This is definitely not a machete. Okay, look at that thickness in the spine. And I mean, that reinforced tip is it was one of my favorite things about this knife, is that reinforced tip and how solid and powerful this thing is. Beautiful full tang construction, 3D machined G10, like nobody does it like Work Tuff Gear does. Now, in terms of the design, it does remind me a tad of a kukri in terms of the blade here, where it comes in, where you can actually use a kukri for like a lot of work, where you can basically take this part of the knife and you kind of tether it and use it to cut up some fine slices of some lighter knot and all that. And then you have the big wide belly that you could use to really pound into wood and process wood with it. And you got obviously that thick spine if you wanted to baton with it. And we'll talk about batoning in a second. But what you expect from Work Tuff Gear is the fact of a really sharp edge out of the box, well-made knife. I mean, this feels so good in the hand. It's heavy. I mean, just as a disclosure, it is a heavy knife. This thing is, actually, it's over 2 pounds. This knife is about 2 pounds, 9 ounces, and it's over 3 pounds in its sheath. So it's not a light knife. So if you're not used to basically using a knife of this size, then it's going to be some getting used to, and it's just obviously it's just like Scab says, it's improving your skill set with using the knife you have in hand and making it work. So now, can this knife work as a camping knife? Well, look, I did some testing on this knife. We wouldn't even call it testing, but we could call them demonstrations. I'd start with a basic sharpness test out of the box. It did cut into the rope and into paracord and into the polyurethane rope very seamlessly. I mean, just completely effortlessly. It just cut right through it. Very, very sharp out of the box. Now, what I know about Work Tuff gear is coming from my friend and partner, Scab from Fire Boys Outdoors. He's basically an ambassador for Work Tuff gear, and he reviews all of the new knives that are coming out. He's been doing it for 2 years now. And I know a lot about Work Tuff gear and what to expect from Work Tuff gear from pretty much his reviews. I mean, from watching his stuff. And his thing is the fact that they are always sharp out of the box, never a problem with basically needing to re-hone them or anything like that prior to cutting. And they're solid, and they don't take chips, and they don't take rolls, and they just handle, you know, rough use, and that's basically what they're made for. So I did cut into a tire with this knife. Now, I found that it couldn't really penetrate the tire because it doesn't have a really fine point, a very strong, very, very robust, strong point. You could definitely punch it into like cardboard or do some hard downward throws, and it'll stick pretty, you know, well into the stump. And it's good for very hard materials to cut into, but to cut into the tire, I had a little bit of a hard time kind of getting through it. But with the seam that was in there, this was able to cut the tire with no problem. And then obviously I cut into wood, I process wood, use it as a chopping machine. It definitely can chop and cut and process wood with the best of them out there. Now, can you use this as a camp knife? I mean, it can be used as a camp knife. It's a sharp knife. It's a very capable knife. It's solid. It's built very well. Can you baton with it? You can baton with it. Now, there is a caveat with batoning, and I think I'm gonna be doing a show with Scab about it. There was an interview that Scab did on his channel, which I'll try to, if I remember, I'll leave a link to that. It was very interesting. He spoke to Mr. Collins and Blackie at his gathering, and they were talking, the subject was about batoning, and about how he doesn't recommend batoning with knives, because there's something about basically banging into the spine and causing that friction in the blade that's going to travel. The energy is going to travel around the knife, and obviously it's going to probably affect the edge at a certain point. If you do it over and over again, you may start seeing cracks or chips from the friction and from the force that's going to, you know, travel around the knife. So what he did though recommend in terms of if a knife you wanted to use, if you were going to baton, you want it to be a high carbon steel. Like a lot of these super steels, he would never recommend batoning with it because they're going to damage the edge eventually if you do it over and over again. Let's talk about the steel of this knife. This knife is an SK85. It's a Japanese tool steel. SK85 is a high carbon base steel. It's somewhat, it can be somewhat compared to a 1085 high carbon steel. The AISI name on the chart is W108 steel. They rate, on the chart, they rate this steel, this SK85, from 56 to up to 65 HRC, which is pretty damn, you know, it can get pretty hard. But this knife was rated at an HRC of about 56 to 58 for more tough gear. And I would argue that it's a little bit more than that, because it really does have a really good edge retention on it. It's generally a spring steel. It's a tool steel, so it's a little bit of a spring steel with an added chromium for better hardness. It keeps its edge very well, but known mostly for its toughness. This is, I'm a big fan of this steel from seeing it work on Scab's channel, from seeing it work on my own. So the knife pretty much overall is about 18.2 inches overall. There's no hot spots, and there's no, it's not front heavy or mid heavy. It's a heavy knife, but it's well balanced to the point where you can definitely get some nice swings on it and not have an issue of it kind of swaying to one or the other. So it's just a perfectly balanced, well-made, solid knife. The whole G10 handle is about 6 inches from here to about here. What's more important, what I think is most important, is the inner grip is about 4.4 inches. So it's a very healthy, lot of purchase in the handle inner grip that you can definitely get a nice size hand onto here. You can see this, I have large hands, and you can see how much room you still have here to fit, you know, any hand very, very comfortably. And it's just such a pleasure to hold this thing. It's a pleasure to hold this thing because it's such a great machined execution. You can see it says, have a good one here. I forgot what it says, but you'll see it on the screen, and which was pretty funny. You got the blue liners here. It's just no sharp edges, no anything like that. It's just so incredibly well made. Also, in terms of basically how this knife comes in, this guy's knife actually comes in many different types of finishes on the blade. This particular finish on the blade is called a apocalypse or apocalyptic finish. You also have a satin finish, a vintage washed finish, and a dark ghost finish. So there's a couple different renditions of the blade that you can order this in. The G10 is all the same color, but the blade itself can go in from satin all the way to dark ghost. So there's a couple different options that, you know, whatever strikes you fancy, whatever you like in terms of aesthetics. But aesthetic wise, I fell in love with this knife as soon as I saw it. It's a little bit of kukri, a little bit of a machete style type of blade by being a lot stronger and more capable than a machete. But there's a couple different things going on here that you can basically use different types of the blade to do different things in terms of wood processing, self-defense, hitting hard, or anything like that. And then you also have a pretty much a 90-degree spine here that you can definitely strike a ferro rod with no problem. I'm not showing you, but take my word for it. It's got a nice 90-degree bevel. Nothing that could cut you, but definitely something you could definitely get a ferro rod in there and strike a fire. So yeah, guys, I like this knife. Julio did a great job in terms of the design of this knife. I'm going to use the knife to my capacity, what I can do with it, what I can show you, to my knowledge base, and to my ability, and also to what the knife is supposed to be doing. And given that I did that on my demonstrations, I mean, no mars on the edge, no scratches, no bends, no chips. I mean, it handled everything extremely well after the cutting. And then you can see now, at the end of the cutting, I did try to get through a very hard Arizona water bottle. And if you guys know those Arizona bottles, they're very resilient, very thick rubber. And if you don't have a good sharp edge, it's going to kind of just, you know, bounce off of it. It's not really, or it's going to indent it in. It's not really going to cut. But this, after doing whatever cutting I did, the tire, the wood, and the banging into the wood and all that stuff, it still cut right through that water bottle with no problem. I was really impressed about that. I've had a couple smaller knives from More Tough Gear, and they all handled everything pretty well. This is just such a solid, beautiful piece of work that you're getting from More Tough Gear, and you know it's gonna last. You know you can push it hard, and it's gonna last you. And you know it's gonna be versatile. It's gonna be able to process wood, be able to go camping with it. But what I think, honestly, this particular knife is really made for is a, you know, shit hits the fan, apocalyptic self-defense knife. Or if you're going camping, something that can kind of, you know, you can survive against, like, you know, a beast that's about to attack you or something like that, you would hope. And this is that type of knife that basically can let heads roll. So it's just, it's a cat buster, it's a self-defense knife. It's definitely something that I think is more of a survival type of knife, but can be used obviously for bushcrafting and woodland, outdoor woodland type of things. Just so you know, with this right skill set, you can work with this big knife and do everything that a small knife can do, okay? But a small knife can't do everything a big knife can do. So remember that. That's always pretty much been my motto. So with the right skill set, yes, this will definitely work for you outdoors, camping. But I look at it as more really just a self-defense, all else fails, you know, something that's going to save your life type of knife. You could pound on this with no problem, but you have a really nice secure grip in the hand. The only thing that I see with people who do have a problem is if they're not used to big knives, you might have a problem basically swinging with it. Now, when I was using it, I didn't really have a problem with hot spots. There are absolutely no hot spots with this. I did find a little, you know, wrist fatigue or fatigue in basically swinging it and using it, because it is a heavy knife. But if you're used to using knives like this is incredibly balanced. I really like it. It's not many like exactly like this, similar, but it's really, really cool. Very good survival type of knife, and if need be, a very good camping knife. Aesthetically, I love it. And great job is Work Tuff Gear. I'm very, very impressed with Work Tuff Gear and what they offer and what they bring to the table. Really looking forward to getting some more of their big knives in my hand, because just seeing it and actually using it and holding it and seeing the results and seeing how it doesn't take damage and how it just, the edge retention holds up. Seeing it on YouTube channels and seeing people using it, compared to seeing it and holding it firsthand, is pretty much no comparison, because you really got experience holding it and using it and seeing how it handles everything you throw at it firsthand to really appreciate everything that Work Tuff Gear brings to the table. So Julio, thanks buddy. Thanks for sending this over to me. Looking forward to getting my hand on more of your stuff, more of your Condor stuff as well, and hopefully you can get into tops as well. Vic Lynn and all the people at Work Tuff Gear that I met at the show, it was a pleasure to meet all you guys. Such a pleasure, such a great company to be involved with and to know, and the individuals, Zeke, Minacho, and everything there, everybody there, they're all a bunch of great guys, great designers, a great crew, and there's something about their work that there's really nothing like it anywhere. So they're one of the top companies that basically produce these types of really hard use type of knives, and it was a pleasure to get my hand on one, and hopefully I'll get my hand on some more and be able to bring that over to you. This is the amazing Kydex sheath. Very good job on it. A lot of different attachments you could put on it. This is the Ape-X or Ape-X apocalyptic finish from Julio Diez, designed and produced from Work Tuff Gear. Fantastic knife. Did everything very well. Very happy with what it did, and still incredibly sharp. So that's all I have for you guys. Ape-X. Until the next sword and knife video, guys. Thanks for joining me on my videos. Much peace and love to each and every one of you. Peace out, everybody. Ciao.